The Garden of Rebirth. There was something haunting about the stillness of the house. The air, thick with the staleness of isolation, hung heavily around the woman as she stood motionless in the dim living room. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows from the half-lit windows creeping along the floor as if they had a life of their own. Amelia's world, once so filled with bustling office chatter and the hum of her busy life, had come to a sudden halt. The weight of loss pressed on her like a heavy shroud, and it had become hard to breathe. Her phone, once buzzing with a constant activity of emails and calls, now sat silent, forgotten, on the kitchen counter. She had been laid off, just like that. The certainty that once ruled her life was gone. The career she had built over the years vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing behind but a void she couldn't seem to fill. Sitting on the worn-out sofa, Amelia watched the clock on the wall tick away, each second mocking her helplessness. Her thoughts spiraled endlessly, trapping her in a cycle of self-doubt and fear. How had it come to this? Why had she not seen it coming? The questions gnawed at her, unanswered. The house, once a warm place filled with the sounds of her ambition and dreams, now felt like a hollow shell. The silence suffocated her. But then, as if drawn by some unseen force, Amelia stood up and walked toward the back door. The familiar sight of the garden outside greeted her, a stark contrast to the disarray in her mind. The garden had always been her escape, a sanctuary of peace and beauty that had witnessed so many of her quiet moments of reflection. Yet today, it seemed different. It felt as though the world outside was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, something to break the stillness. As she stepped outside, the cool breeze ruffled her hair, and Amelia closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing the sensation of the wind to wash over her. She walked along the garden path, the soft crunch of the gravel beneath her feet echoing in the quiet. Her gaze wandered over the familiar flowers that had once brought her so much joy: roses, daisies, lavender, all vibrant and alive, reminding her of simpler times. Yet it was a small, delicate flower that caught her attention, growing out from between two large, jagged rocks. It was a flower she had never seen before. At first glance, it appeared almost fragile, its petals a soft shade of violet that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light. But what struck Amelia the most was its tenacity. It had found a way to grow despite the harsh conditions, its roots deep within the crevices of the rocks, its petals unfolding against the odds. Amelia bent down to examine it more closely, her fingers brushing lightly against the smooth petals. She couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. How had this tiny flower managed to bloom here, in such an unforgiving spot? How had it survived the weight of the rocks pressing down on it, the lack of nutrients, the harsh sunlight? The question lingered in her mind, and for the first time in days, Amelia felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The flower, so small yet so resilient, seemed to speak to her in ways that words never could. It was a symbol of survival, a message that life could endure even in the most difficult circumstances. Amelia straightened up slowly, the weight of her thoughts shifting. She had been so consumed by her own struggles that she had forgotten the one thing that had always been true: life goes on. No matter the obstacles, no matter the setbacks, the world kept turning, the flowers kept blooming, and the sun rose every day. It was a quiet, humbling realization. In the days that followed, Amelia's mind continued to return to the flower. It was as though it had sparked something deep within her, a sense of renewal she hadn't even known she was seeking. She began to take long walks in the garden, each step grounding her in the present moment. The once paralyzing fear of the unknown began to fade, replaced by a determination to start over. She didn't know exactly what that meant, but she knew she couldn't stay trapped in the shadows of her past. She had to find a way forward, to rebuild her life from the ground up, just as the flower had done. It wasn't easy. There were days when the doubt returned, when the old familiar feeling of hopelessness threatened to pull her back into its grip. But with each passing day, the spark of determination grew brighter. Amelia started looking for new opportunities, reaching out to old colleagues, exploring fields she had never considered before. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were rejections, setbacks, and moments of frustration. But with every challenge, Amelia found herself growing stronger, more resilient, much like the little flower in the garden. And then one day a call came. A job offer. One that not only paid better than her old job, but also aligned with her passions in ways she had never imagined. Amelia could hardly believe it at first. The weight that had been pressing down on her shoulders for so long was suddenly lifted. She was overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude, as if the universe had conspired to deliver exactly what she needed when she needed it most. But even more than the job itself, it was the journey that had transformed her. The process of rediscovery had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, about the importance of letting go of fear, about the strength that could be found in starting over. With her new job secured, Amelia found herself spending more and more time in the garden, reflecting on how far she had come. The flower, which had once seemed so insignificant, had become a symbol of her own rebirth. Every time she looked at it, she was reminded that life had a way of surprising her when she least expected it, and that even in the darkest times, there was always a chance for growth. As weeks turned into months, Amelia's life began to take on new meaning. The shadow of her old fears no longer loomed over her. She had embraced the unknown, allowing it to shape her in ways she had never imagined. And as she stood in her garden one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she couldn't help but smile. The future no longer seemed like an overwhelming mystery. It felt like a promise. In the end, it wasn't just about finding a new job or rebuilding her career. It was about rediscovering the strength within herself, about learning that even in the face of adversity, there was always room for growth, for beauty, for hope. The flower in her garden had shown her that life would continue to move forward, no matter what. And in that, Amelia had found her peace. As the seasons changed, the flower continued to bloom, its delicate petals swaying gently in the breeze, a constant reminder of the power of resilience. And Amelia, now more than ever, felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way forward, always a chance to start anew. And with that knowledge, she faced the future with a heart full of hope, ready for whatever came next.
Whispering echoes.